And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to hour number 2 of the Hagmann Hagmann Report. We are joined now by our very special guest, Mr. Kevin Shipp, former CIA agent.
Yeah, if I can jump in here, I saw Mr. Shipp, I believe, or heard Mr. Shipp on an interview. I want to say it might have been in a local CBS interview that was rebroadcast. Talk about an intelligent man. I've also read portions of his book, From the Company of Shadows. Now, he is one of the most widely experienced officers in the CIA. He occupied positions as an agent on the protective detail of the director and deputy director of the CIA. He was a manager of ongoing operations, an internal security officer, a counterintelligence investigator tasked to ferret out moles of the CIA, a counterterrorism center officer, a protective operations team leader, and a polygraph examiner. Now, what in the world, I wonder, what did he do for the CIA? You know, he must have just been, coasting in his career. You talk about a man with a wide array of experience. Well, he wrote a book. It's called From the Company of Shadows. Now,
yeah, that title makes me wonder.
No, I got to tell you, he revealed in his book accounts of actual CIA internal and external operations, CIA counterintelligence, the turmoil that exists inside the CIA itself. And folks, we've talked about this, the culture of secrecy and its constitutional implications, actual case of CIA cover-up, veiled terrorist activity within the United States, and more. Folks, we are so... I got to tell you, I'm very proud to have the privilege to speak to Mr. Kevin Shipp. Kevin, are you with us?
Yeah, hey, Doug and Joe, thanks for having me.
Oh, man, it's our pleasure. Do you mind if we call you Kevin?
Absolutely, please do.
All right. Well, Kevin, I got to tell you, a great book. I ordered it just before showtime. I just want to tell you that, from your website. And, folks, the website is Kevin Shipp with 2 P's, kevinshipp.com. And you can go to HomelandSecurityUS.com for hard links to his website. Kevin, we're going to give you the microphone, and you just take us where you want to take us.
Sure. Thank you, Doug. And the website is kevinmshipp.com.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's quite all right. There's other Kevin Shipps out there that are unfortunately probably getting nasty messages from the Middle East that were meant for me, so that may be a good thing. Anyway, I'll go into a little bit of my background for you all, then get into the story here. We're going to be talking about, as you mentioned, I was an internal security officer. I was on the protective detail for the director of the CIA, then William Casey, and that was during the Iran-Contra scandal when things inside the CIA were white hot. Tremendous controversy was going on. Bob Woodward had come out and said that he had snuck into the director's room and gotten him to admit his participation in the Iran-Contra scandal. I was one of the agents that occupied the hot seat outside the director's room. I can tell you that event probably is not true. We caught Mr. Woodward and gracefully showed him the door. So he wrote that in his book, Veil, The Secret Wars of the CIA, and he's a good journalist, a good man, has done a lot of good work. I like his work, but in that particular case, in the book, I dispute that visit because I don't think it ever happened. During that time, we saw one of the most inspiring events I think maybe we'll ever see, and that was the fall of the Soviet Union. Incredibly inspiring event to see that happen, and it's something that all of us as CIA officers had worked for and dreamed of, and the agency had for years. It was just phenomenal. The sad part was, for me, as I went through my career years down the road, was I was to begin to see the erosion of my own freedom in my own country slowly and gradually to the point we have today. So it was quite a reversal. I participated in several counterterrorism missions, some of which could have been a one-way assignment, so we had to set things in order before we left. I've been to about around 20 countries, I guess. I was a Category 1 decorated officer, humbly, and I loved the agency and was dedicated to my country. Really, it was everything for me. I was also a counterintelligence officer, and we were a special office that was created and tasked with searching for moles inside the CIA after the Aldrich Ames espionage case and leading up to Robert Hansen. Excuse me. And the CIA was in a complete uproar. A massive amount of highly classified information was turned over to the Soviets by those two essentially double agents. Hundreds in the counterintelligence center, we were quote-unquote interviewing people, and hundreds of people were being investigated. Lots of lives and careers were ruined, and it was just a very, very difficult and dark time for the CIA, and difficult, at least for me, having to participate in that part of things. The information, national security information, that was lost through those two cases, Ames and Hansen, is unthinkable. And Americans were never really told the extent of the damage that was done from the information they turned over. It was absolutely huge. And the sad part is this wasn't caused by a foreign enemy, by a war, by someone penetrating our system. Really, it was caused by our own government's own failure to protect its information and some of the information of our assets. And that's just the way government functions. When it gets big, it gets more inefficient. For me personally, as I rose up through the ranks, my personal wake-up call came while I was doing an international security investigation. During that investigation, I uncovered, essentially stumbled across what appeared to be a global vulnerability to the identities of our agents in several different countries. And the vulnerability was, and I can't go in obviously into detail, but what it did was it enabled foreign agents to locate the identities of our agents in their country. Excuse me. So I did about a several-month investigation on that. The more I looked into this inside the CIA, the worse it became. So at the end of about 6 months, I wrote a detailed report, submitted it to the top channels of the CIA, advised that it was pretty apparent that foreign agents could identify our cover agents overseas, and if they could do that, of course, they could eliminate them. So it was a dangerous situation. I would have thought that the CIA would have lauded that and cheered on that investigation. I think probably anybody would think that. However, my report was destroyed 3 times by the office that it was sent to. I resubmitted it, hand-carried it there twice, called back, and they said they couldn't find it. This went on and on for about a month. Then I checked the server, the internal server for the report that I'd written and sent, and it had literally been erased from the internal server and eliminated from the CIA database. So obviously I was shocked as a dedicated officer. I began receiving threatening phone calls from senior CIA officers ordering me to drop this investigation or my career basically would be over. These are coming through the internal phone from my own superiors. I couldn't figure out why in the world they would not want this hole plugged. So I had a decision to make. Basically, my career was at stake. And I remember going home that evening thinking, what am I to do about this? And after a good bit of thought and a little bit of prayer, I decided I just can't let this go. I mean, some of our people out there could be killed. So I went back and decided I was just going to push it through and let them do what they wanted to do. And through an act of really providence, the Department of State Inspector General's office got a copy of my report, read through it, and they were relatively alarmed. They called me, took the investigation over. They did the investigation themselves, and they found that it was far worse than I even thought. And after a large global investigation and a huge report put out to the intelligence community, the CIA was publicly rebuked for putting the lives of his agents at risk. And I talk about that in the book a little bit. However, at that point, I had a target on my back, and you could just kind of sense that there were eyes, people just waiting for me down the road a little bit. So I was in the belly. Yes,
Kevin, tell me about what time, or what year this was, what administration this was.
This is in 1994.
Okay, all right. Go ahead.
Thank you. After this public rebuke and the turmoil that it caused, they created a big task force and went in to fix that problem, but only after really they were forced to do so. So I began to see an agency that was more concerned with covering its mistakes and negligence than protecting its own people, and that was a defining moment for me. Of course, I was in the belly of the beast, and I began to see the lengths that the CIA would go to conceal unconstitutional operations. They were hiding information from Congress. Now, granted, at least this used to be a constitutional government. I don't think it is any longer. but they were hiding information from Congress, and anyone inside who challenged what the agency was doing was pretty summarily silenced. I'll get into that a little bit later. And sorry if I talk too much, guys. Feel free, please. You're the host to jump in.
This is fascinating. We're going to give you free reign, Kevin, because what you've got to say is so important. And folks, again, Kevin's website is Kevin M. Shipp, SHIPP.com. You can go to HomelandSecurityUS.com. Click on the hard link to his website. It is correct there. And grab a hold of his, get a copy of his book. But go ahead, Mr. Shipp.
Yep, thanks, Doug. Thanks. And as I go into my personal story, and I saw actually what the CIA would do and what they really did personally to my family, specifically my wife and kids, let me lay out where we are now since that happened in the United States. We're in a post-constitutional government, and we live in essentially what is almost an electronic concentration camp. In that, we live in a surveillance state where all U.S. citizens, all of us, as we all know now, are being monitored and are potential suspects from the NSA program and the information they're disseminating to law enforcement for arrest without warrants. We now have a secret government that exists outside of our constitutional government, and that is the intelligence community. There are 1,271 secret sites in the United States with a domestic mission only, not a foreign mission, a domestic mission focused on internal to the U.S. and on U.S. citizens. That includes the NSA sites, there are CIA sites, FBI, and Department of Homeland Security sites within the United States operating to such an extent that not even Congress knows how expansive this secret government is. It's very alarming. They have a sophisticated... I'm sorry.
What's that number again? 1,000?
There are 1,271 secret sites within the United States.
Wow. Okay.
Then their mission is focused domestically, not in the foreign field. Since 9/11.
But isn't that against the charter of the CIA?
Yes, it is. The CIA's charter originally was created with a foreign mission and a foreign mission only. And what they have done is inserted themselves into law enforcement fusion centers. In just about every city in the United States, you will have a CIA person in that fusion center. So it has now turned internally into the United States itself, and that is what the Truman administration and others decried when the CIA was created. They were afraid it was going to turn into that sort of thing. Well, guess what, folks? It has, and now it's engaged in doing that. We know what the NSA is doing. What I found, and I think what people need to be aware of, both in the intelligence community, especially in the military, is they've developed a sophisticated mechanism to conceal their unconstitutional activity and illegal operations. They have perfected this thing since about 1953 or so, and they have a system that is very difficult to penetrate. Benghazi is an example of that, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. But the weapon they used is a little-known weapon called the State's Secrets Privilege. And there's only been a couple of books written about that. I go into it in great detail in my book. But the government, the intelligence community, NSA, CIA specifically, will use the state's secrets privilege to shut down any case trying to shine a light on what it's doing. For example, the NSA domestic spying program, the NSA is using the state's secrets privilege right now to shut down lawsuits about entering into Google and the other search engines. They're using the secrets privilege to shut the case down, seal the evidence from Congress so that no one will ever see the program, the details, or what it's doing. So the state secrets privilege is extremely important to know about, and I'll explain a little bit why a little bit later as I go on here. I didn't know the extent of the constitutional violations within the CIA and the intelligence community until I challenged the secret system myself, personally. Then I saw the dark side of the CIA firsthand. And let me go into that story a little bit, if I may. I was second in command on a secret government facility, assigned to housing with my wife and my 3 children. They were young at the time. We moved into the house, and I was doing my operations there that I was assigned to do. And within about 3 months, my children began bleeding from their noses, all of them. We started seeing bruising all over their bodies. They were vomiting. They started having headaches so severe that they required morphine. They lost their short-term memory. My wife was bedridden. She couldn't even remember where she put her car keys. Her headaches were so bad. She was suffering from a kind of dementia almost. Everyone had strange rashes on the exposed areas of their skin. They were seriously ill, and I knew that. I asked my agency to help find out what was going on in or under that house. They refused, citing the sensitivity of what they were doing there. Just basically refused and left us out in the cold. So I took the family, without them knowing it, to several doctors and immunologists and had them tested. And the blood tests and the immune system test showed that their immune systems were so severely damaged. In the case of my oldest son, it was potentially fatal. It could have killed them essentially. And when I asked the doctor, what could cause this? Well, he said, well, they've been exposed to some significant toxin, and in your oldest son's case, it's similar to being exposed to a burst of radiation. He's been exposed to something very, very bad. 4 of the neighbors around us were experiencing identical symptoms, and 2 of them had developed blood cancer. So there was something very, very wrong. So I raised the flag. I raised the flag to headquarters, saying people are dying here. We got a real problem. There's something very, very wrong. We need someone to come out and test these houses and to do it as soon as possible. Please. I did it through channels professionally. Shockingly, I got the report back. They refused to test the houses. I was ordered to be quiet. As a matter of fact, I was ordered not to communicate with Washington, D.C. at all from that location any longer. So what I did was I conducted my own secret tests of the house, took samples, sent them away to some national experts on toxic exposure. One weekend I secretly flew my oldest son to an immunologist in the Midwest who did his blood testing and told me that his immune system was almost completely shot. I interviewed witnesses on the base they were loyal to me because they knew that I was kind of correcting some of the security issues there. We found out that the house was built on old munitions. There was a black substance growing all through the walls and the ceiling and in the crawl space. The water was contaminated. My son found a fragment of a shell, said mustard gas on it, and so it was pretty clear to me that there was something there that they needed to test and get us all out of there. Essentially, what happened was a huge battle ensued. Our house was broken into. All of the reports and doctors' diagnoses that I sent back to Washington mysteriously disappeared. It got to the point where we finally got a hazmat company to come in and do their own evaluation. They did and said, your place is infested with toxins, and it's so bad that all of your possessions, personal things, are going to have to be destroyed. So we sat there, and especially my children in the yard, while people dressed in hazmat suits boxed up all of our belongings, including my kids' toys, and carted them away in a truck to be burned. So we lost everything. So I filed, once again, being a good officer, I filed an internal grievance with all the evidence, the doctor's reports, the environmental tests that I had taken, photographs of this black stuff in the walls, sent it through the internal official system, which is, everything is marked and tracked. Never heard back. When I went up to visit headquarters, I went into the internal areas, located the person in charge, and found out that my grievance had disappeared completely from the entire internal system. And the guy who didn't know what was going on told me it's been lost. And I said, well, what do you mean it's been lost? I mean, this is the official system. What does that mean? And he said, it's gone. It'll never be found again. So I moved on. We got back. They vacated us out of the house we were out for about 5 days. The house was locked. It was quarantined. While we were away, the house was broken into. I trapped the house, some of the oldest tricks in the book, tape seals on the windows, and Radio Shack voice-activated tape recorder, and a cheap motion alarm. So if someone came in, the voice-activated tape recorder would go on, and it would record
you went
everything.
Old school.
Yeah, old school. The oldest tricks in the book. Everything any PI knows, and it worked. We heard the rustle, heard them come through the door. Couldn't tell what they were doing, but we went back into the bedroom and we found someone had painted a chemical on the ceiling over where some of these toxins we had identified with UV light, where some of these toxins were. They had painted a chemical substance. You could see the brush strokes that lit up under UV light over where this toxin was. So they broke into our house. Then the family began to be followed on and off the base. We were being surveilled from the woods. The guards, who had become friends of mine because I was helping them out, advised us that all the records of the break into our house that I reported and the condition of the house and the illnesses all had been secretly removed from the records, and one of the folks signed a signed statement that he was there when they did that. And then immediately I was ordered to return to Washington, D.C., so we traveled back there, checked in. We lived in a hotel for about 30 days, I think it was, and that's when the fun began. I was taken in to interrogations, me against several of them, and they would interrogate me for an hour or two and try to get me to recant the evidence that I had provided in my grievance document. And of course, in more professional terms, I told them, basically to pound sand. That just wasn't going to happen. So meeting after meeting like that, they couldn't get me to recant what I had written, and plus I had the evidence and the doctors and blood test results. So they ordered me to undergo CIA blood and psychological testing at CIA headquarters. Now, the blood tests and my family's diagnosis of PTSD were two of the big pieces of evidence that I had sent them. So now they're trying to get me to go in there and psychologically test me. Now, I know them, so I knew what they were doing. And they'd come out with their own blood tests and probably label me as paranoid or a disgruntled employee and the kind of things I saw done in the counterintelligence center. So I knew how they worked, and when they asked me to report for those blood tests and psychological testing, I respectfully said, no, I don't think I'm going to do that. So I got a very courageous Texas attorney to help us in our case, and he'll be a lifelong friend. He saw all of this himself. He can't talk about it because he's bound by an agreement. But he and I went to CIA headquarters to discuss my grievance and the evidence in my grievance. They harassed us there. We sat there for an hour or so, and basically apparently they wanted us to sit there for hours for some reason. So we got up. My attorney said, we're going. They're not going to treat us like this. We walked out. They came out yelling. There was an altercation in the hallway there, and we advised them, look, you have no control over us. We're leaving, and there's nothing you can do about it. We left, and as soon as my attorney, I shook hands, and we bid goodbye. He got in the car to fly back to work to his office in Texas. When I returned to my office, there waiting for me were several CIA officers, agents, standing there. They closed the door, and they attempted to force me to sign an agreement stating that I had engaged in insubordination, I'd misused the government credit card, and I guess they thought they could scare me into doing that. I respectfully refused and said, no, I don't think I'm going to fall into that trap, folks. Then, of course, they threatened my career. If you don't do this, your employment is going to be terminated. And I said, well, make my day. So went back to my job as a polygraph examiner and found out my movements throughout the building were being monitored. My computer was tapped and bugged, and everything I was writing was being looked at. And after trying to work this thing internally, I turned around and filed a personal injury suit against the CIA with evidence of my wife and son and two youngest, son and daughter, their illnesses. And despite the fact I was a Category 1 top performer, I had 2 meritorious unit citations, 3 exceptional performance awards. As soon as that personal injury suit hit the courts, I was placed on quote-unquote administrative investigation. The threats of termination from there continued, and the case eventually reached a federal judge who, looking at the evidence, ruled in my favor and said, no, this case, I want this case to proceed. And that was one small ray of light. Unfortunately, 2 CIA officials showed up and demanded a secret meeting with this judge. After that meeting, a gag order was issued ordering us not to talk to anybody about this. We received a copy of that gag order, and everything was blacked out. You couldn't even read it, so we didn't even know what we were gagged by. So I think this judge, although he was probably a little scared by that meeting, basically was trying to do the right thing. So he ordered the CIA and our family to a court-ordered settlement. We had about $10,000 in medical bills. We'd lost all of our personal property. The kids and my wife were still sick. So we all sat down to a settlement, and after about 5 hours, the CIA signed a settlement agreement. We all agreed. Everybody signed on the dotted line. The legal document was finished, signed by all. We get a phone call 2 days later. Actually, our attorney was the one who got the call 2 days later, And the CIA said, we're not going to abide by that agreement. He said, wait a minute, that's a signed legal document. And they said, well, we don't have to abide by that. We're not going to settle. And they ordered him to tell us if we did not accept a lower settlement, then they would invoke the state's secrets privilege, conceal the evidence in our case, shut it down, and seal it. So if we talked to anyone, we would go to jail. And so not even our congressman or senator could have access to the evidence. We demanded, no, you signed a legal agreement. We are not going to accept a lower settlement. You abide by what you signed. Summarily, that's what they did. They turned around and invoked the state's secrets privilege, and in a secret court, shut our case down, sealed all the doctor's diagnosis, the blood tests, the environmental tests, and everything, placed a seal on it, so not even our congressman or senator could ever see it. Then our family was threatened with jail if we talked to anyone about the case because it was now sealed. It was under an official seal, so we could never talk about what happened for the rest of our lives. Now, unfortunately for them, they're the ones who trained me, and we were trained not really to back down from threats very easily. So that's when I began saying, all right, okay, you guys want to take it this way, then here we go. I'll start standing up. Internally, of course, I was monitored. The threats continued. So eventually I resigned to fight with my attorney without being under constant surveillance. And we started fighting them from the outside, taping conversations and things like that, some of which we caught them with their hand in the cookie jar, and that's another part of the story. We still have some of those tapes. But anyway, the last thing I told them, I said, I'm resigning. I'm going to fight this to the very end. And the last thing I told them was this, humbly. I said, the same courage that made me a good CIA officer with this organization is the same courage that I'm going to use against you now to bring you to justice for what you've done to my family. They both sat back looking like they sucked on a lemon and didn't say anything, and I walked out. Shortly after that, I think it was about a week, the CIA credit union raised the interest rates on our car loans. Now, granted, I had resigned, so now our livelihood was in jeopardy. The CIA credit union raised the interest rates on our car loans, which caused the payments to be higher. Then they threatened to repossess the cars if we didn't make those higher payments. I called the credit union, the supervisor, not knowing what was going on, said, I don't believe they did this. This looks like some kind of retribution, which I have on tape. Then I tried to cash out my retirement funds to save my family because we no longer had any income. I put in a request for disbursement of my retirement funds. We had nothing to live on. We'd lost our health insurance, all of our property, and got a call from the Office of Personnel Management stating that they would not release my retirement benefits. And I asked, what do you mean? You kind of have to do that by law. And the lady responded, your agency has ordered us not to disperse those funds. So I did some checking, found out that's a felony. So I called this lady back at OPM, and I said, ma'am, you understand that what you're doing, I don't care who told you to do it, but what you're doing is a felony. I suggest you look into that. And I had my disbursement within 1 week. So at that point, I had taken my wife and oldest son and my youngest daughter and son to a psychologist because they were really suffering. My oldest son was diagnosed with PTSD. So was my wife. My kids were having nightmares of men in dark clothes breaking in and taking their stuff, which is not far from what happened. They were diagnosed as suffering from anxiety, and really they were devastated. I knew what they wanted, the agency. I knew what they were trying to do. They were trying to totally destroy me so I would keep my mouth shut and go away. I learned later that this is a technique that they've used multiple times before, and they've perfected it. I've had people say, man, you're going to wind up in a dumpster or something, and my response is always, no, they don't kill you fast. They kill you slow. So it doesn't look like they're doing it. They'll destroy your finances. They'll destroy your career. They'll destroy your reputation and try to push you really to the end, and that's what they did in this case. I found out that that's really an MO that they've used quite a bit. The problem with them is I've got a faith that is outside of my professional life, and that gave me courage. And this time, someone was going to stand up against them and stop this. So I decided to hold the CIA accountable for what they did to my family. I contacted Congress. I requested a congressional inquiry. A couple of congressmen were very, very kind and very, very helpful. I have to mention Frank Wolf. He's probably one of the only constitutional congressmen left on the Hill. True hero. Really tried to hammer the CIA and get them to release the evidence, and the agency didn't even bother to return any of his calls. I think they made 6 calls, and they didn't even bother to call him back. So I couldn't get anything done through Congress. They were still doing this to my family, so I finally decided I wrote From the Company of Shadows. The first book that I wrote, which is now Chapter 26, was about what happened to our family with the doctor's diagnosis and the illnesses and the cover-up. I got that back from the CIA Pre-Publication Review Board, and it looked like somebody had taken a can of black spray painted the whole document. Everything was blacked out. Even the names of my wife and children and the names of our attorney. I mean, just simple, ridiculous things. So I decided, okay. So I wrote From the Company of Shadows, and after about a 2-year battle, we got a lot through in there through a Freedom of Information Act, citing the executive order that prevents them from blacking out unclassified information, which they completely ignored in Chapter 26. But I got a lot through. I included Chapter 26, which is blacked out on purpose, so people will read through these actual accounts of CIA operations and how the CIA functions, and all of a sudden they come to Chapter 25, which is titled The Tyranny of Secrecy, and that's what we're seeing now with the NSA in Benghazi. But it's called The Tyranny of Secrecy, and I show this mechanism that they use to cover things up using the power of secrecy. And then I go into Chapter 26, and that's an actual case, that's our story, and it's completely blacked out. So Chapter 26 is the account I wrote of in my first book that they blacked out about 90%, virtually entirely. And as I mentioned, including all the way down to the name of my wife and children. So From the Company of Shadows, I battled the CIA for about 2 years. They examined, the Pre-Publications Review Board examined every word and every sentence of the entire book, and after 2 years they finally sent me a letter saying the book was approved for release. Unknown to them, I built a code into the book. and in From the Company of Shadows, there's a code that exposes the blackouts in Chapter 26 and what they did to our family, and the CIA missed it. So it's in the book.
Interesting. Well, Kevin.
Yeah, sure, Doug.
If I can ask a couple of questions.
Yes.
Let me start from present and kind of go backwards. First of all,
sure.
How are you and your wife and your children? Are you physically recovered? Are you well? Are you okay?
No. My son still suffers. His immune system is still shot. He's sick most of the time. He still has PTSD. My wife has PTSD. She was sick for about a year, very sick. She's recovered from that. However, any livelihood for her is gone. I think she's holding down 2 part-time jobs. It ruined our marriage. We got divorced. She couldn't take it anymore, and I understand that totally. But we're still on good terms, and we talk regularly. But she has no income. I completely lost my career. The CIA called other private companies that do the sort of work my expertise is in, and some of them are former supervisors of mine. They gave me good recommendations, brought me in there to hire me, called the CIA, and the CIA told them, don't hire him. And they asked, well, why? Why? And they said, we're just ordering you not to hire him. So they ruined my career completely.
Wow.
17 years of what. So here I am now. Now I'm a writer. I'm writing books, and in terms of doing that kind of work, they decimated that. My children, and this is the reason I am coming out now with the code. My children basically have lost their future. We lost our income. We lost our property. They have now lost all hope of ever going to college because we don't have the money now set aside to do that. And I had included the code in From the Company of Shadows as a legacy to them after I was gone, so that their story would be told. They've been pleading with me lately. They're still suffering. That's why I decided to come out and say, okay, you can mess with me all you want, but you just don't mess with a man's children. So that's why I decided to do this interview and to come out with the fact that there is a code woven in the book and what it reveals.
And listeners, ladies and gentlemen, members of the extended Hagmann and Hagmann family, you're listening to the testimony of Kevin M. Shipp, a former CIA officer. Wow. Kevin, let me ask this. when you were describing the sickness, the house that you lived in, the contamination, was this deliberately placed there, or was this just, dare I say, coincidental? I mean, what happened?
Well, I had a good working relationship with the FBI, and we did some investigations together. And the FBI agent even asked me when she found out some of these things that were going on. She said, "You think that this is retribution?" And I mulled that over a little bit. And if you think back to that big investigation I did that embarrassed the whole organization, began to realize that, well, this may be connected. And then when the head, the officer that got rebuked for that investigation I did, all of a sudden became in charge of where my house was located, and walked into the office one day, I realized, yeah, this is connected. So
wow.
We don't know that there was a poison in there. They wouldn't let us test to see what it was. They basically capped that. My samples came back. There was definitely Stachybotrys, which is it's a mold that puts out mycotoxins and causes neurological damage, and Aspergillus causes liver damage. The reports came back that there was toxic black mold in there. The water was contaminated in some of the wells, but there was something else, and obviously we were prevented from finding out what that was. And I've had people ask me, even our attorney said, why are they going after your family with such a vengeance, and why don't they just settle? And my response was, I don't know, but there's something more there they don't want people to know about, and apparently they're using us as the anvil to pound on to shut this thing down, and that's the conclusion that we reached.
So they were and did make an example of you. Wow. I'm just trying to process this. I cannot imagine living through what you lived through, the
real
slow
life
kill.
Burn notice. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, working for an agency such as the CIA, when you're inside there, you'd think that you would be respected and treated with some dignity, and to hear what you have gone through, it is like the service that you've done for your country has been ignored, and you've been targeted.
It's difficult to. Wow. Go ahead, Mr. Shipp.
I was just going to say, I say in the book that I learned that, and I think any officer that comes out and talks will tell you this: the CIA eats its own. They are not loyal to their employees. All they care about is protecting their operations and what they're doing. I saw several lives and careers ruined while I was in there, so they tried to use me as an example, but I'm by no means the only case. There are other cases out there. This is what they do. So, no, they are not loyal. They'll come out, as they did in our case, and say, we take the health of our employees very seriously, unquote. And usually when they come out with a statement, you just believe the opposite. But no, they have no loyalty to their people. The loyalty is only to the protection of the organization, and anybody that rocks that boat is going to receive a firestorm.
Well, okay. Now, you mentioned the code that you built in there, and I don't know how deep you want to talk about that. It's part of you included it in the part of the book. Is that what you did, or?
Yeah, Doug. The code is woven through the book. There are certain pictures in the book that have a meaning behind them, and I have a key to this. It's kind of a multifaceted code. There are certain passages in the book that when you examine them closely, they reveal how the state secrets privilege was used against our family to silence our case. And then I embedded a numeric code in certain parts of the text, and there's a numerical key sequence that I have stamped on the inside of the jacket of the copies of the books that I've sold at speeches and the ones that I send to folks through my website. It's on Amazon.com, but since I don't have access to those books, the numerical sequence will not be stamped on the inside cover, although the code will be in the book. So I wove this numerical sequence through the text, stamped it on the inside cover, and what I've done is I've released both the code and the key to you and your program, just because I believe you all are one of the last bastions of freedom of the press left, and I think holding government accountable this way is the only way we're going to maintain what's left of our freedoms.
Absolutely, and I thank you for what you've done. Now, wow. So This is the first time. Is this the first time publicly you've referenced this, or about the code,
yeah.
or?
This is the very first time that I've told anyone about this. As I mentioned earlier, originally I built the code into the book as a legacy to my now ex-wife and current children, so that someday, maybe after my passing, they'd have the key and they'd be able to go to the press with this story using the code and the key that was in there. Of course, since they're still suffering and their lives are ruined, they've been pleading with me. I decided to come out. And this is the first time I've ever brought the code out and discussed it with anyone.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to history being made. In my view, here is an true American patriot, gave his country, gave everything, gave his all for the service of his country, and was. I don't even have any words to describe what happened to you. I mean, I've heard stories, and I have friends within and outside at the periphery of the agency. And I've got to tell you, yours, Mr. Shipp, is a story that I'm really shaken right now by what you're telling me. So I can only imagine what your wife, your family, you went through. Do you blame any administration or I mean, the larger picture?
Doug, this is pan administration and it's pan political party. This apparatus, this giant secret government, to include the state secret privilege and the NSA program, was set up under the administration of George Bush. The apparatus was put into place under that administration, and now under the Obama administration, it's become a monster. They're taking that apparatus and they're using it to target citizens. So it's both Democratic and Republican. It's become the nature of our government and the secret government I'm talking about. So it has nothing to do with political parties. It has nothing to do with Democrat or Republican. It has everything to do with a government that is tyrannical and out of control.
My goodness, indeed. And we talk about this political paradigm that is no more the Republican and Democrat. It doesn't matter. This nation is a captured operation. We've been captured from within. And folks, just for those tuning in just now, we're talking with Kevin M. Shipp, the author of From the Company of Shadows. Folks, you've got to get this book and order it from Mr. Shipp's website, which is hard linked to HomelandSecurityUS.com. For the first time ever, Mr. Shipp is now saying that he wrote this book heavily redacted by the CIA, and now he's got a code. He admits tonight there's a code in this book that if you look at the code, perhaps you can decode the redacted portions of the book to find out the true story of what happened to Mr. Shipp and his family and the reasons behind it. This is incredible. This is absolutely incredible, Mr. Shipp. Well, I'm going to give you the floor. Go ahead and continue. And perhaps you could tell us where we are and what we should be looking at, given everything that's going on today with the CIA, the NSA, this monstrosity of an apparatus that's really turning inward against us.
Yes, as I mentioned earlier, we are in a post-constitutional government in America, and as heartbreaking as it is, our constitutional government is over, and it has been taken over. It is usurped by this massive intelligence apparatus, its system of secrecy, and the members in the Congress and the Senate who have been bought and paid for, many of which are no longer constitutionalists. Really, they're neo-statists. So we really don't have any constitutional representation, with a couple of good exceptions, but not many, that represent the Constitution. They're more about maintaining their office and getting reelected and doing whatever it takes to do that. So we no longer have the balance of powers. The executive branch has become the equivalent of a monarchy. We've all seen the executive orders that the president has issued, really putting Americans' privacy in danger in terms of declaring martial law in an emergency situation. We now know that the NSA lied to us twice. First, that they weren't monitoring all of our electronic traffic. Then they said, well, we are, but it's nothing of any substance. And now we know that they have actually recorded the content of the conversations and the Internet searches, other digital pocket litter, down to our license plates are being photographed and stored in databases. So this is almost an Orwellian society we're living in, and I don't use that term lightly. We are now living in a surveillance state. We're living in a police state, And as a former CIA officer, I've watched and seen this monster from the inside. It is out of control. Every American should be concerned. And the question is, can we do anything about it? And my answer is, the size and the power that they have, if you face them, face against that, no, there's nothing you can do. What we can do is what we're doing tonight, is use the new freedom of the press, get the truth out there. And I speak to a lot of groups, and the rooms are usually packed about the constitutional crisis in America. There are groups all over this country that want our Constitution back. There's a huge groundswell, a grassroots network of people, real, true lovers of America and the Constitution out there. It's probably in the millions that are joining together civilly to write, to speak, to protest, to work, to educate. What I'm doing in the speeches I give is educating people regarding this constitutional crisis. We win it through freedom of the press, freedom of speech, and as I told one group, the United States was founded on prayer. It began on prayer, and that's how we begin America again, is by founding it on prayer. Then we go from there. We have to have courage. We have to have fortitude. What they want us to do is fear them. If we fear them, they win. What's the old adage? People that when people fear their government, there's tyranny. When the government fears the people, there's liberty. I think it was Thomas Jefferson said that. And we all need to remember, do not be afraid of them. We lose if we do that. So we don't fear. We stand up against them. We talk. We use the freedom of speech. We work together to get our America back, and I think that's a solution.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If we can find a free speech zone to speak in.
Right.
Kevin, do you think we have enough time? Because I just feel that time is quickening. I feel that really our things are happening so fast. With you mentioned Benghazi.
Yeah.
You mentioned, I got to get your thoughts on that, because I've written a number of articles for Canada Free Press and about the CIA operations center there and the running of weapons into Turkey. But I guess, okay, well, let's switch gears, and if you don't mind, let's talk about Benghazi, because that's a subject near and dear to my heart.
Same here.
What do you know? What do you know about Benghazi?
I'll tell you what people need to know from the very beginning. The Department of State and the administration comes out and says that the Accountability Review Board did a thorough investigation of Benghazi, issued a report under Thomas Pickering, and the report showed that the Secretary of State was not culpable, and that basically there were some administrative errors made, but nothing serious, and they closed the investigation down completely, saying that Hillary Clinton was not involved, Obama was not involved. Well, what people do not know is that the Accountability Review Board, or called the ARB, the only thing the ARB looked at was the security situation before Benghazi. They didn't look at the attack or the aftermath of the attack at all. They did not interview the Secretary of State, and all the interviews that they conducted, they were not allowed to take written or recorded notes. There was all verbal, so there was no record. That's the ARB that they're talking about on the news, and people need to know that. There were several wounded people from Benghazi that were guarded behind closed doors at Walter Reed Hospital, and not even Congress was allowed to get in to speak with these witnesses. About 33 of those witnesses are CIA officers, and we understand that they're being polygraphed about once a month to make sure that they don't talk to Congress or to the press about what really happened in Benghazi. So I think this is the biggest scandal since Watergate, and I think it's probably bigger than Watergate.
I agree. And your reference to the ARB, of course, that was headed up by Thomas Pickering,
right.
Which, and of course he's got ties to Valerie Jarrett, if you will, and also Iran.
Oh, yeah. Yes, that's true.
So plus, obviously, the Benghazi situation, I believe if we really had an honest investigation into what was going on there, we'd find, and this is according to my source, Breitbart, of course, reported that there were 35 CIA officers and operatives and assets, but according to my source, there were many, many more, exponentially more assets, intelligence assets there, and officers and agents than the 35 that are being talked about. And of course there are British and French and other intelligence assets there. So and this was weapons running operation based on our information. Is that consistent with what you're, what you know?
Yes. Okay. I think it's pretty apparent that the CIA was running guns through Turkey. Those arms and missiles were being given literally to jihadists trying to get into Damascus, Syria. And when the CIA was challenged on doing that, they came out. I think it was General Boykin kind of shed the light on them about that, and they came out and said General Boykin is quote unquote flat wrong. Then we find out later they come out and say they're actually providing arms and equipment directly to the Syrian rebels, jihadists now, and they're actually admitting it when they lied about doing it before. That is a violation of international law to do that in the first place. In the second place, they lied to Congress, and they're still refusing to provide to Congress exactly where they're shipping these weapons to and who's getting them. I think we all know they're literally going to Islamic jihadists, and that is, I think, part of one of the big reasons why they don't want Benghazi to come out.
Exactly. Now, in your book, you've got a couple of chapters dedicated to radical Islam, Sharia law, and stealth jihad. And of course,
yes.
I understand you're a professional colleague or friends with Steve Emerson.
Yes,
a man I respect. I respect him tremendously. His work.
Me too.
And you know, now, have we been infiltrated here via the Barack Hussein Obama administration? This regime, have we been infiltrated by assets of the Muslim Brotherhood?
Seriously, that's one of the things I talk about in my lectures. There are, 6 practicing members of the Muslim Brotherhood that are national security and counterterrorism advisors reporting directly to the President of the United States. Hillary Clinton's chief advisor, Anthony Weiner's wife, Uma Abedin, I think you pronounce it, is connected to the Muslim Brotherhood. Her relatives are active Muslim Brotherhood members. They're not now trying to figure out where she got the hundreds of thousands of dollars she made. But the counterterrorism policy is actually being shaped by Muslim Brotherhood members who Barack Obama has appointed as his chief advisors in the White House.
It's incredible. So we're being taken over from within by this Islamic agenda. Is this purely an Islamic agenda, or is this a globalist agenda? I mean, because go ahead.
Yeah, that's always the big question. I can't answer to the globalist agenda because my expertise obviously is counterintelligence, counterterrorism. I know that it is an Islamic agenda without question, and you can very easily prove that is the case, and that these people advising Barack Obama are Muslim Brotherhood members. So it is without a doubt an Islamic operation. Whether it's a global operation outside of the global Islamic caliphate they're trying to form, outside of that, I can't answer to that question, but I can tell you they are trying to set up a caliphate and overtake the U.S. Constitution, and in their own manuals they state they want to replace the Constitution with Sharia law. And we call that sedition here in this country. But the people whose basic belief is to do that are now occupying high positions in the White House.
Wow, this is incredible. Obviously, the listeners to this broadcast know we've covered extensively the infiltration by the Muslim Brotherhood. I've got several other questions, Mr. Shipp. Now we're up against the top of the hour. Can you stay for another segment or so on the other side of the break here to take a few more questions?
Sure, I'd be glad to. Yeah, be glad.
Oh, that's perfect. All right. Just stand by for about another 3.5, 4 minutes. We're going to be right back. Folks, you're listening to a very special edition of the Hagmann Hagmann Report on this, the 21st day of August 2013. Our very special guest we're very proud to have on, Mr. Kevin Michael Shipp, the author of From the Company of Shadows. Folks, you've got to get his book. Order from his website. It's hard link off of HomelandSecurityUS.com. Get it back.